So, oh, I'm wearing a new Sharks hat that I got last night, and I'm wearing a new New Day shirt that I got yesterday too. Because wrestling and t-shirts, and apparently it's going to get to about 40 degrees here this week. So that's 40 degrees Celsius. You can look that up in Fahrenheit for you people in the States. It's going to be hot, and by anybody's standards, 40 degrees Celsius is ugly, and I don't like it. Might melt this computer. So I get asked a lot, well, which Canadian team's going to break through first? And people wanted me to do a video on which Canadian team's going to win the Stanley Cup first, Toronto or Edmonton. See, Leafs and Oilers fans want this conversation to be about who's going to win first, Matthews or McDavid, which is fine. And I think an argument can be made that both of them will hold up a Stanley Cup someday. But is it just them? Because here's the thing. So I made a list. This is just a rude list. It's not to slight Malkin that I've said Crosby's the best player in Pittsburgh each time. But I went with the number one player on the team. I tried to go with a forward for the most part. Number one defenseman. I put Dumoulin for Pittsburgh because he played with a broken hand and he broke it again and he still kept playing. So the guy's a warrior. And Letang's was out, and Daly to me. Anyways, and number one goalie Matt Murray. He held up the Stanley Cup both times. He won the last game. And it's interesting because it's pretty strong goalies all the way through. You got Matt Murray, Corey Crawford, Jonathan Crawford, Tim Thomas, Antti Niemi. Yeah, he was good for Chicago that year. Marc-Andre Fleury, Dominic Hasek. When people say you don't need goaltending to win in the regular season, they're right, but you need it to win in the playoffs. You don't get anywhere without goaltending. And you have to have a horse on the blue line. You have to have a guy who can play 25 minutes a night. Letang, Keith, Doughty, Chara, Keith, Letang, Lidstrom. You got to have a guy who can play that. And, of course, they have other guys supporting them. But you have to have that one go-to guy if you're going to win a Stanley Cup. Then you've got your star. Crosby, Kane, Kopitar, Taves, Kopitar, Thomas, Taves, Crosby, Datsuk. Kopitar had a bad season, but both times that the Kings won that Stanley Cup, he was a major part. You could argue that Jeff Carter came in, Mike Richards came in, and that put them over the top. But you have to have that big star player. So if you're going to win a Stanley Cup, you really need that big star player. It's important to have a horse on the blue line, or at the very least a top six who can all play their roles and play them well. And you need a very good starting goaltender. So let's take a look at the Canadian teams, shall we? Because I don't think this is just a Toronto at Edmonton argument. Calgary's best player, you can argue, is Gaudreau. So Gaudreau, to me, does he equal Datsuk? No. Crosby? No. Taves? This isn't fair. Really. So Gaudreau, I'll say maybe I'll give them a... Apparently I'll get a new marker for this part. Okay, so I'll give them a half point star-wise. And this marker isn't much better than the other one. Give them a half a point star-wise. Yeah, there we go. That's much thicker. That's too thick. That's what she said. Mark Giordano is a very good defenseman. Is he Letang, Lidstrom, Keith? No. So I'll go with a half point. Mike Smith in net. I'll give them a point on that. So we'll say 2 points overall. And I'm not grading it out of 5 or out of 3 or out of 4. Just saying 2 points overall. McDavid, absolutely point there. Clefbaum, I think is good. Is he that good? I don't know, so I'll give a half point there. Talbot absolutely is as good as Niemi at the very least. So we'll say 2.5 there. So 2.5 for Edmonton. Montreal, Pacioretty, yeah, I'll give a half point Pacioretty. Shea Weber, he was good in the playoffs this year, so I'll give them a point there. They make the playoffs, Weber's good enough. Price, absolutely. So 2.5 for Montreal. Ottawa, Carlson's their best player. What about their forwards? Are their forwards, with Carlson as their best player, is their forward group good enough to win a Stanley Cup? I'll go with a half point for the fact he's the best player. 1 point for him being their stud defenseman. And Anderson played very well in the playoffs, so they're at 2.5. Okay. So Toronto, with Matthews, 40 goals as a rookie. I think the sky's the limit. Morgan Riley. Yeah, I'll give a half point for Riley. I think he has to improve further before he's a Stanley Cup winning defenseman. Anderson played very well in the playoffs, so 2.5 there. You guys are starting to see a trend, right? I'm gonna be pausing soon and clear this out. I'm gonna do this another way too. These are the starting numbers. Vancouver, the Sedins, that's a no. Not now. Edler, that's a no. Markstrom, that's a no. The Canucks have 0 points currently on their roster towards the Stanley Cup. Scheifele, half point because we haven't seen him really in the playoffs to speak of, other than that 4-game sweep. Bufflin absolutely is a playoff warrior. Mason, half point, so Winnipeg's at 1 point. Okay, so I've cleared off the board, and I've brought up 4 other things that I believe make a difference as to whether or not a team wins the Stanley Cup. Can they roll 4 lines? Edmonton, right now I would say yes. Do they have 6 really good top 6 defensemen? Do they have depth on the blue line? I'll give them a half point for that because I think they could use some help. Coach, I think their coach is fantastic. Organization, I think the organization's good. So that's 3, 5.5, that's 6 points. 6 points for Edmonton in their quest to become Stanley Cup champions. Montreal, do they roll 4 lines? I'll give them a half point because I think they do lack some depth. Blue line, they need a puck mover. That's a half point. Claude Julien is a very good coach. Organization, there's a perception, real or not real, that there's issues with Bergevin and some of his staff. That's going to cause players to maybe not want to go there. So that drops Montreal to 5 points. Ottawa, can they roll 4 lines? Yes. Yeah, I'll say 4 lines. Defense, Clayson relies on this a lot, but I'll give them a point for that. Guy Boucher, I'm going to give a half point because Boucher usually has not a very long shelf life. So we'll see if he's able to continue what he started this past season. And the organization, half point there. There's things in Ottawa that I still think are yet to be dealt with. So I'll give them 5.5 points. And again, you make this scale out of whatever you want. Toronto, can they roll 4 lines right now? Yes. Do they have 6 defensemen? I think they need another one. Their coach is good. Their organization is good. So they're tied with Edmonton with 6 points. Calgary, can they roll 4 lines? Yes. 6 defensemen? Yes. Coach, I'm not 100% sold on the coach. Organization, I think, is very good because if it's not very good, then Brian Burke will off some people. He looks like a vampire, people. The older he gets, the more his hair has this vampire-esque quality to it, and I don't know that that's a coincidence. Winnipeg, can they roll 4 lines? Mildly. 6 defensemen. I'm tortured on the 6 defenseman thing. Coach, I like Paul Maurice. I'll say that right off the bat. Organization, I'm not convinced about Cheveldayoff at all. So that's 1, 2, 2.5, 3.5 points for Winnipeg. Vancouver, can they roll 4 lines? Yeah. Actually, they can. They're not overly talented, but they can roll 4 lines. Do they have 6 defensemen? Half point there. Their coach is an unknown, so I'll give him a half point because he hasn't coached yet in the NHL. Organization, I'll give a half point because I admit they took a while to catch on to the whole you need to rebuild thing until it was too late. So 2.5 points. Which leaves Toronto and Edmonton, in my eyes, is the most likely. And Ottawa and Calgary tied for second. So what's the difference between Edmonton and Toronto? And there's very little to choose between them and either Ottawa in the East or Calgary in the West. It's going to come down to Connor McDavid and how far he can push Edmonton. When Gretzky won all those Stanley Cups in Edmonton, he won 4 of them out of the 5. 4 of them had Gretzky on them. He didn't win the Conn Smythe every year because he wasn't the best player every year. But he was still the driving force behind the Oilers. There was still Messier, there was Curry, there was Grant Fuhr, there was Coffey. There were all kinds of other guys who played really, really well. You go as far as your star player takes you. And for Edmonton, I think if I had to wager, I'd say Edmonton brings the cup to Canada first. And it'll be interesting to see how it works out. So you guys can let me know how you see the math. See, the math thing got started, and I'm like, fine, I'll do math. I'll show you guys how I figure it out. And it's just it's not easy, and there's not much to choose between most of the ones at the top. This is for getting to the Stanley Cup. This is not for making the playoffs or who's going to be any good. This is just who wins the Stanley Cup. Which Canadian team has the best chance? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And thank you so much for watching. You guys make this possible.